The silence in our apartment has weight now. It presses against my chest when I walk through the living room where Isaac used to leave his guitar propped against the wall. The instrument is gone now, along with his books, his vintage vinyl collection, and that ridiculous ceramic mug shaped like a dinosaur that I used to tease him about. What remains is the echo of words I can't take back, and the hollow realization that some mistakes don't get second chances. I'm Phoebe, and I destroyed the best relationship I've ever had with a single, thoughtless comparison that I thought no one would remember. Turns out, the person who mattered most was listening. It happened on a Saturday evening in March, at our friend Kelly's housewarming party. Kelly had finally bought her first place, a charming duplex in the arts district with exposed brick walls and windows that caught the setting sun just right. She'd invited our entire circle, college friends, work colleagues, and a handful of people we'd collected over the years through various connections. Isaac and I had been together for 2 years by then, living together for 8 months, and I'd started to feel that comfortable settledness that comes with really knowing someone. Maybe that was part of the problem. Comfort can breed carelessness. The party was in full swing by the time we arrived. Kelly had strung lights across her new patio, and someone had brought a playlist that perfectly balanced nostalgia with current hits. Isaac immediately gravitated toward the corner where a few guys were discussing the local music scene. He played bass in a weekend band called Terminal Velocity. Nothing serious, just something he did for fun with his coworkers from the marketing firm. I found myself in the kitchen with Kelly, her sister Michelle, and 2 other women I'd known since college, Janet and Roxanne. We were doing that thing women do at parties, catching up on life while helping with last-minute preparations, our conversations weaving between personal updates and commentary on everyone else's lives. "So how are things with Isaac?" Janet asked, reaching for a bottle of wine from the counter. She'd been married for 4 years and had recently started asking everyone about their relationship status with the intensity of someone who'd found happiness and wanted to share it. "Good," I said, arranging cheese on a platter. "Really good, actually. He's been talking about us maybe getting a dog." "That's a big step," Michelle chimed in. "Very domestic." "Yeah, I know. It's sweet, really. He's been sending me pictures of rescue dogs all week." I paused, then added with a laugh, though I have to admit, sometimes I wonder if he's too, I don't know, predictable. Like yesterday he brought me coffee in bed and I actually thought, of course he did. The women exchanged glances. Roxanne raised an eyebrow. "That sounds awful, a man who brings you coffee in bed. How will you survive?" No, that's not what I mean," I said quickly. "I love that about him. It's just remember Paul, my ex from law school," Kelly groaned. "Oh, here we go." "No, listen, Paul was this tornado of a person, unpredictable, passionate, always surprising me with these grand gestures. One weekend, he'd whisk me away to some random mountain town he'd discovered. The next, he'd show up at my apartment with tickets to a concert I'd mentioned wanting to see months earlier. Being with him felt like, I don't know, like being on an adventure." "And look how that turned out," Janet said dryly. "Didn't he cheat on you with his study group partner?" "Well, yes, but that's not the point. The point is, Isaac would never do something like that, the cheating or the spontaneous adventure. He's dependable, which is wonderful, but sometimes I miss that element of surprise. Like if Isaac brings me flowers, it's because it's Valentine's Day or because I had a bad day at work and he wants to cheer me up. Paul would bring me flowers because he saw them and thought they matched my eyes, or because it was raining and he thought I needed sunshine." "So you're saying Isaac is too nice?" Michelle asked. "Not too nice, just safe. Predictable. I always know what he's going to do, what he's going to say. Paul kept me guessing. There was electricity with him, you know. This constant sense of what's he going to do next. With Isaac, I know exactly what he's going to do next." Kelly was shaking her head. "Phoebe, you're being ridiculous. Isaac is wonderful. He's kind, he's funny, he's crazy about you." "And boring," I interrupted. "I mean, not boring as a person, but boring as a boyfriend." Reliable to a fault. Paul was like lightning, dangerous and unpredictable and exciting. Isaac is like, I gestured around the kitchen, searching for the right comparison. Like a warm blanket, comfortable and safe and nice to have around, but not exactly thrilling. Roxanne nearly choked on her wine. Did you just compare your live-in boyfriend to a blanket?" "A warm blanket," I clarified, as if that made it better. "A really nice warm blanket that you're grateful to have." "Jesus, Phoebe," Janet said. "Do you hear yourself? You're complaining because your boyfriend is consistently thoughtful and caring instead of being an emotional terrorist who happened to be good at romantic gestures." "I'm not complaining exactly. I'm just saying that sometimes I miss the excitement of not knowing what's coming next. The butterflies, the uncertainty, the drama," Kelly finished. "You miss the drama." "Maybe a little," I admitted. "Is that so wrong? I mean, doesn't everyone want to feel like they're living in a romantic movie sometimes instead of I don't know, a documentary about stable relationships?" That got a laugh from the group, and I felt vindicated. See, I wasn't being unreasonable. I was just being honest about the difference between steady contentment and passionate excitement. "The thing is," I continued, warming to my theme, "Paul made me feel like I was the most fascinating woman in the world. Like I was this mysterious creature he couldn't quite figure out. Isaac knows me so well that there's no mystery left. He can predict my moods, my reactions, what I'll order at restaurants. It's sweet, but it's also kind of deflating. Like being completely understood takes away some of the magic." Looking back now, I realize I was performing for my audience. The more animated I became, the more engaged they seemed. Janet was nodding along, Roxanne was leaning forward with interest, and even Kelly, who had always been Isaac's biggest advocate, was listening with the rapt attention of someone witnessing a particularly compelling confession. I felt like I was finally articulating something profound about the nature of love and relationships, something that these other women would understand and validate. What I didn't realize was that I was also performing for myself. Somewhere in the process of explaining my feelings, I was convincing myself that they were more legitimate than they actually were. Each word I spoke seemed to make my dissatisfaction more real, more justified. I was building a case against Isaac without even realizing it, using my friends as both jury and witnesses to my growing list of relationship grievances. The wine certainly didn't help. I'd had 2 glasses by that point, enough to loosen my tongue, but not enough to make me obviously drunk. It was that dangerous middle ground where everything I said felt clever and important, where my usual filter had been temporarily disabled. In that moment, surrounded by women who were hanging on my every word, I felt like I was having a breakthrough about my relationship instead of sabotaging it. "I mean, take last Tuesday," I continued, gesturing with my wine glass. "I had this terrible day at work. My boss rejected a project I'd been working on for weeks, and I came home feeling like a complete failure. Isaac took one look at me and immediately started running a bath. He lit candles, he put on soft music, he even brought me a glass of wine and sat on the bathroom floor just to keep me company while I soaked. It was perfect. It was exactly what I needed." "That sounds lovely," Michelle said, though her voice carried a note of confusion about where this story was heading. "It was lovely, that's the problem. It was so perfectly lovely that I almost started crying, and not in a good way, because I realized that this is what Isaac does. He fixes things. He sees that I'm upset and he immediately goes into caretaker mode. There's no messiness to it, no unpredictability. He didn't ask me what was wrong. He didn't try to solve the problem. He just automatically knew exactly what would make me feel better and did it." "Again," Roxanne said slowly, "this sounds like a complaint about your boyfriend being too good to you. It's not about him being too good. It's about... God, this is going to sound horrible, but it's about him being too competent at relationships. Like he's read all the books and knows all the right moves. Paul never would have thought to run me a bath. He probably would have tried to cheer me up by suggesting we go out for drinks, or by launching into some passionate speech about how my boss was an idiot and I was brilliant. It wouldn't have been as effective as Isaac's approach, but it would have been more authentic, more emotionally spontaneous. I was aware that I was talking too much, that I was dominating the conversation and probably revealing more about my relationship than I should have been. But I also felt like I was finally putting words to something that had been bothering me for months. The nagging sense that Isaac was almost too perfect, too understanding, too consistently loving. The way he seemed to have an automatic response to every situation, as if he'd studied the manual on how to be an ideal boyfriend and was following it to the letter. "I think what I'm trying to say," I said, setting down my wine glass and leaning against the counter, "is that Isaac loves me like it's his job. He's professional about it. He's really, really good at it. But sometimes I wonder if he's good at loving me specifically, or if he'd be just as good at loving anyone who happened to be in my place." The kitchen had gotten quieter as I spoke, the energy shifting from supportive girlfriend talk to something more serious. I could see the other women exchanging glances, and I sensed that I'd crossed some invisible line from relatable relationship venting into territory that made them uncomfortable. But I was too deep into my own thoughts to stop. "Paul was terrible at relationships," I continued. "He was selfish and inconsistent and probably a little bit damaged. But when he loved me, it felt like he was loving me specifically, not because I fit into his idea of what a girlfriend should be, but because I was me. Because something about me specifically drove him crazy in the best possible way. With Isaac, I sometimes feel like I'm just the person who happened to be there when he decided he was ready to be in a committed relationship." I knew as soon as I said it that I'd gone too far. The words hung in the air like smoke, and I could feel the weight of them settling over the group. Kelly was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, and Janet was looking down at her hands. Even Roxanne, who usually had a quick comeback for everything, was silent. "Or maybe," Roxanne said after a moment, "it creates a different kind of magic, the magic of being truly known and loved anyway." I was about to respond when I noticed the kitchen had gotten quieter. Not completely silent, but the background hum of conversation had shifted. I looked up to see Isaac standing in the doorway, holding 2 empty beer bottles, his face carefully neutral in that way that meant he was working very hard to control his expression. How long had he been standing there? My chest tightened as I tried to remember what I'd said in the last few minutes. The warm blanket comment, the part about him being predictable, the comparison to Paul. "Just grabbing some fresh beers," he said, his voice casual but not quite steady. He moved to the refrigerator without making eye contact with anyone, his movements a little too deliberate. The kitchen had gone completely quiet now. Kelly was staring at me with wide eyes. Janet was examining her fingernails intently, and Michelle was suddenly very interested in the cheese platter. Isaac pulled 2 beers from the fridge, popped them open, and headed back toward the living room. "Isaac," I started, but he was already gone. "Well," Roxanne said after a moment, "that was uncomfortable." "How much of that do you think he heard?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the careful way he'd avoided looking at me. "Enough," Kelly said simply. I spent the rest of the party trying to catch Isaac's eye, but he'd developed a sudden intense interest in every conversation that wasn't happening near me. When I approached the group he was with, he'd find a reason to refill his drink or step outside for air. When I tried to corner him by the bathroom, he managed to get pulled into a discussion about local politics that somehow lasted 45 minutes. The drive home was brutal. Isaac turned on the radio and kept the volume just high enough to discourage conversation. When I tried to bring up what had happened, he'd respond with monosyllables or change the subject to something completely neutral, like whether we needed to stop for groceries, or if I remembered to pay the electric bill. Back at our apartment, he went straight to the bedroom while I lingered in the living room, trying to figure out how to fix this. When I finally went to bed, he was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying my words and trying to understand how something that had felt like harmless venting to friends had become this massive, looming thing between us. The next morning, Isaac was up early, making coffee and toast like always. But where there would normally be a good morning kiss and questions about my plans for the day, there was polite distance. He'd made enough coffee for both of us, but he didn't bring me a cup in bed. He asked if I wanted toast, but he didn't remember that I liked it with honey instead of butter. It was like he'd decided to stop knowing me as well as he did. "Isaac," I said, sitting down at the kitchen table, "we need to talk about last night." "Do we?" He didn't look up from his newspaper. "Yes, what you heard. What I heard was my girlfriend telling her friends that I'm boring and predictable and that she misses the excitement of dating someone who treated her badly. His voice was level, but I could hear the hurt underneath. That's not what I said. You compared me to a blanket, Phoebe. A warm, comfortable blanket that you're grateful to have around but don't find thrilling. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were tired. Do you know what that feels like? To hear the person you love describe you as the human equivalent of bedding. I didn't mean it that way. How did you mean it? Because from where I stood, it sounded like you were saying that everything I do to show you I care is boring and predictable. That the fact that I pay attention to your needs and try to make your life better is somehow disappointing. I felt tears starting to form. Isaac, I love you. I love how thoughtful you are, how you take care of me. But you miss the drama. You miss not knowing if someone's going to show up or disappear, if they're going to be wonderful or terrible. You miss the anxiety of wondering if someone really cares about you or if they're just good at playing games. I miss feeling surprised sometimes. I miss butterflies. Butterflies are your nervous system responding to uncertainty and stress, Phoebe. They're not actually a good thing. They feel like a good thing. They feel like being alive. He stared at me for a long moment, then folded his newspaper and stood up. I'm going to go stay at my brother's place for a few days. I think we both need some space to think about what we actually want. Isaac, please don't go. We can work this out. Can we? Because I don't think I can compete with your nostalgia for someone who made you feel bad about yourself, most of the time, but occasionally swept you off your feet. I don't want to try to be more unreliable or less considerate just to create artificial excitement. He packed a bag while I sat on the bed, watching him fold his clothes with the same careful attention he brought to everything else. Even leaving me, he was thoughtful about it, taking only what he needed, leaving the apartment tidy, making sure I knew he wasn't abandoning me permanently, just creating space for us both to figure things out. I'll call you in a few days, he said, kissing my forehead like he'd done 1,000 times before. I just need to think. That was 2 weeks ago. He's called twice, once to coordinate picking up more of his things, once to check on me after I sent a text about the weird noise our refrigerator was making. Both conversations were polite and distant, like we were acquaintances managing shared responsibilities rather than two people who'd been planning to adopt a dog together. I've had plenty of time to think about what I said that night and why I said it. The truth is, I was being honest about something I'd been feeling but hadn't fully examined. I did miss the unpredictability of my relationship with Paul, the way he could make me feel like I was starring in my own romantic comedy. But I'd conveniently forgotten the other parts. The nights I'd stay awake wondering if he was losing interest, the way he'd disappear for days without explanation, the constant feeling that I was auditioning for his attention instead of simply receiving it. Isaac never made me audition. He saw me clearly. My morning hair, my tendency to leave coffee cups around the apartment, my inability to remember to water plants, my anxiety about work presentations, and he loved me anyway. Not despite these things, but including them. He didn't need me to be mysterious or perfect or constantly surprising. He liked me exactly as I was, messy and predictable and human. What I'd mistaken for boredom was actually peace. The absence of butterflies wasn't a sign that the relationship lacked passion. It was a sign that I felt secure enough to be myself without fear of judgment or abandonment. Isaac's predictability wasn't a flaw, it was reliability. His consistency wasn't boring, it was trustworthy. Paul's surprises had been exciting, but they'd also been selfish. When he showed up with flowers because they reminded him of my eyes, it was really about him. His impulse, his romantic gesture, his need to be seen as the kind of person who did romantic things. When Isaac brought me coffee in bed, it was about me, my comfort, my morning routine, my preference for starting the day gently. I think what I really missed wasn't the excitement of uncertainty, but the heightened awareness that comes with new love. The way you notice everything about someone when you're still discovering them. Isaac and I had moved past that phase into something deeper, but less dramatic. I'd interpreted the settling of those initial fireworks as the relationship becoming boring, when actually it was becoming real. The worst part is that I can see now how my words must have landed. Here was this man who'd been consistently loving and supportive, who'd made space for me in his life and his future, who'd been showing up every day in small but meaningful ways. And I'd essentially told our friends that his dependability was disappointing. That his love was too easy, too comfortable, too safe. I called him yesterday, not to ask him to come back, but to apologize. Really apologize, not just for the specific words, but for the mindset behind them. For wanting him to be less himself to satisfy some misguided idea about what romance should look like. I was wrong, I told him. Not just about what I said, but about what I thought I wanted. I thought I missed excitement, but what I actually missed was feeling grateful for what I have instead of always wondering what I might be missing. He was quiet for a long time. I appreciate that, Phoebe. I really do. But I don't think I can unknow what I know now. That part of you will always be wondering if I'm enough, if this is enough. And I can't spend my life trying to prove that steady love is as valuable as dramatic love. It's more valuable, I said. I know that now. Maybe, but knowing it and feeling it are different things, and I need to be with someone who feels it. He's right, of course. Trust, once broken, doesn't repair itself just because you recognize it was broken. I damaged something fundamental between us, not just his trust in my feelings for him, but his willingness to be vulnerable with his consistent, reliable love. Last week, I helped him move the rest of his things out of our apartment. He was careful and kind about it, just like he'd been about everything else. He made sure I knew where the spare key was hidden, reminded me about the landlord's weird policy about maintenance requests, and left me his brother's number in case I needed anything. Standing in our newly half-empty living room, I finally understood what I'd lost. Not just Isaac, but the rare gift of being completely known and loved anyway. The security of waking up next to someone who chose you again every morning, not because you were mysterious or exciting, but because you were you. I don't know if Isaac will ever trust me with that kind of love again. I don't know if anyone will. But I know now that if I'm ever lucky enough to find someone who wants to bring me coffee in bed every morning, I'll try to see it for what it is, not a symptom of a boring relationship, but evidence of a beautiful one. The apartment is quiet now, but it's a different kind of quiet than before. This silence isn't weighted with words I can't take back. It's empty space waiting to be filled with whatever comes next. Maybe that's not the same as excitement, but it's possibility. And for now, that's enough.